All right. Well, hello everyone who's attending today. Thank you so much for coming. Hopefully this presentation helps you all get a better idea of how to present at an online conference. If you've never done it before, or if you just kind of want a refresher, or maybe see if you can gain a couple of new tips on how to present an online presentation, whether you're doing a poster or PowerPoint. So I will address both today. My name is Dr. Kayla Baker, and I'm in the exercise science program here at Western. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Okay. So as I said, we're going to be talking about how to present your presentation online. I'm going to go over, first, we'll talk about how to actually prepare before you start presenting, what to prepare beforehand in terms of what your camera should be pointing at, where you should be standing, those types of things, how to hold yourself during the presentation, and then how to actually present the PowerPoint and poster. The last thing I'm going to talk about as well is how to put together just some tips on how to put together your PowerPoint slides. So I don't know exactly maybe how I can ask. I kind of want to ask real quick, who's doing a poster presentation versus who's doing a PowerPoint presentation? So I guess, let me see if I can make this. I don't know what just happened there. Let me stop sharing real quick. Okay, so can you do a thumbs up if you're presenting a PowerPoint presentation? Okay, one person, two people. Okay,
One, two,
so a
three,
few.
5, 6.
6 people. Okay, 7. Okay, so it looks like a little more than half, maybe. Okay, so let me minimize this again. There we go. Okay, so about more than half. So that's perfect. So I'm going to address both how to present your PowerPoint and how to present your poster. And then at the end, I'll spend maybe 2 to 3 minutes on just some tips for your PowerPoint slides. So I apologize to those of you who are presenting a poster and hopefully attended the poster workshop. I just want to address, since we don't really have a PowerPoint making workshop, I did just kind of want to address that at the end just for a couple of slides. So anyways, let's get going. And if you have questions throughout, please feel free to ask questions throughout, whether it's in the chat or if you want to unmute yourself. Either way is fine. Okay. So just some general info before we start. So for the actual conference here at Western, you can use any type of recording device that you want. If you want to record your presentation on Zoom, that's totally fine. If you want to use PowerPoint to record it, there is a recording method in PowerPoint you can use too, that's fine. If you want to use MediaSite, that's fine. Or if you want to stand next to your poster and actually have a video recorder, or I guess we just use our phones now or something like that, that's totally fine too. So you can really use any method you want to record your presentation. The only thing that you will need to do is upload that presentation to YouTube. So however you do record it, you'll at the end upload it to YouTube, and that will be your final submission. So once your abstract's accepted and then you're able to submit your presentation, you'll submit it as a YouTube link. The length of the presentation, so it's different for PowerPoint and for poster. So for PowerPoint, it's going to be 10 minutes, and for poster, it's going to be 5 minutes. So just keep that in mind with if you're presenting PowerPoint versus poster. The poster presentation is going to be a lot shorter, and I'm going to go through both PowerPoint and poster and how to break down that time limit. Okay, so before we are actually recording our presentation, we have some things we need to prepare. So this part is not going to be talking about your actual PowerPoints. This is this part of the video. So me standing here where I can be seen. So when I talk about the background, I mean what's physically behind me. So obviously, if I was going to record a research presentation, I wouldn't want these pictures up on the wall behind me. I would want a completely blank slate. So you want to make sure that you're not having the audience being drawn to anything in the background. So in other words, no distractions. Try not to have any sort of, like if you're recording in the kitchen, try not to have, a bunch of kitchen utensils up or things like that. Try not to have a bunch of pictures up in the background. So for example, if you look at this image, you can kind of see there's this tripod and a painting in the background. And if that was someone who was presenting, I don't know anyone who wouldn't be thinking, I wonder what that painting is. So you really want to kind of draw the audience to you and your PowerPoints versus what's in your background. So try to have a completely blank background if possible, and try to make sure there's no window right behind you. If the window's behind you, it's going to make you look like a shadow. It's going to be really hard to see your face. So make sure the light's in front of you, not behind you.
And Dr. Baker, I'm going to stop you for a couple questions in the
Okay.
chat. The
Oh,
first
yes.
one is PowerPoint an option for the WKU Student Research Conference? I thought poster was required. My response to that was that you can make your poster in PowerPoint, correct?
So yeah, so you will make your poster in PowerPoint. It'll just be one slide. So it's not going to be multiple slides. So the difference would be that the poster is in an actual research poster format on one PowerPoint slide. And then the PowerPoint presentation is like a lecture, kind of like this, where I have multiple slides. And that should be in the poster YouTube video that's up on the workshop too. I'm assuming they went over that in that workshop.
Yeah, so we record the workshops and they are posted to the website. So you can go back and look at that workshop if you want to see more specific information about making your poster on a single PowerPoint slide. And the other question is, are we presenting in front of people live or just submitting the recorded video on our own time?
You will not be presenting live. So the live part is going to be a Q&A session. So you will be recording your presentation and uploading it to YouTube, and that's going to be the presentation. So there's no live presentation. It's not going to be like this where you're presenting live on Zoom. The only thing that would be live is when the audience or judges are asking you questions and you would have to answer those real time, but that's the only thing that's live. Your presentation is pre-recorded.
Can I ask a question to
Yeah.
clarify?
Yeah.
So I understand the poster has to be made on the PowerPoint format, but my professor and I were talking about this today. We'd have to move around the poster and zoom in to be able to see it because the writing will be small on the screen. But with a PowerPoint presentation, then we could do the lit review, the results, the methodology, all the different sections. I know I said those in the wrong order, but you know what I mean? It would not, you wouldn't have to zoom in and out of it. Seems like it would be easier to do it with just a PowerPoint for each section. I didn't know that was a option.
So I see what you're saying. So for the poster, so you would have to make the poster no matter what, for the poster submission. And the way we're going to do it, the instructions haven't been uploaded or anything like that yet, I don't believe. But for the poster, the way it's going to work is you'll create your poster in that one slide on PowerPoint, and then towards the top, you're going to have a link in that poster that will link the person to your YouTube presentation. So that way the audience can still view your poster. So, but then I guess your question would become even more relevant to, well, can I create my poster and then have the link be to a smaller PowerPoint presentation? I don't know if I'm even able to answer that because I don't make those final decisions. So
Yeah, I can write the question down, Dr. Baker and Dr. Faust. So we can follow up via email, I believe.
Yeah, I'm not a doctor, but thank you anyway.
were there any more questions?
There is not that I see.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, so then aside from background, Then we'll talk about background noise. So I'm sure you're all aware that we want to limit background noise as much as possible. So just a reminder, make sure that if you do live with roommates or anybody else, make sure they're aware that at least for that time being, to try to be quiet or try to get to a place where there's going to be zero background noise, because even the slightest amount of background noise can be distracting. Like before I came on, I was making a cup of coffee and I didn't realize until right when I had turned on the Zoom that the coffee maker was making this kind of hissing noise. And so I immediately turned it off, because even just little things like that, you don't realize that it's background noise because you might be used to certain sounds. But in the video, even little things like that are going to be distracting. And then, of course, dressing appropriately. So again, because it's an online presentation, sometimes we feel like we don't have to do as much as if we were in person, but it's also about how you feel when you're presenting. So you want to also feel confident when you're presenting. And heck, even if you just want to wear pajama pants on the bottom and then a nice dress shirt on top, you'll look more confident, you'll feel more confident. And I'm definitely a proponent of just dressing completely how you would if you were going to be attending an actual research conference. You'll feel more accomplished too, because you'll actually feel like you're presenting a professional presentation, which you are. This is a professional presentation, even though it's not in person. Also, make sure your camera is at eye level. Make sure that you're not speaking directly to your slides. So I love this, but it's true. Make sure the camera is positioned as though it was a human being. So make sure you're looking into your camera so that your audience feels like you're talking to them and that you're not just reading from the slides. It'll capture their attention more too. And it's hard to do that if you don't have a lot of practice. So make sure that you're practicing your presentation, make sure that you don't have to read right off the slides, that you really understand the content and the material that you're presenting, and practice with the setup too. Practice with the camera up, practice looking into the camera, practice recording it even so you can go back and watch it. Definitely practice, 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 even though it's not a live presentation. Okay, now we'll move on to how to hold yourself during the presentation. So make sure, these are just tips. You don't have to listen to anything I'm saying, but these are just some helpful tips. Make sure you're standing up during the presentation. So I'm standing up right now, and even when I give my Zoom class lectures, if I'm in my office, I'm always standing up too. I feel like I give a better presentation when I'm standing than when I'm sitting. I can't slouch when I'm standing. When you're sitting, sometimes we just unintentionally slouch. We don't look like we care as much when we're sitting. We look like we care more when we're standing up too. And again, you'll just feel more confident, like you're giving a better presentation when you're standing. Also make sure you're standing still. So try not to do this swaying thing back and forth, which kind of comes naturally if we're not used to giving presentations. It's kind of that nervous sway like this. Try not to pace, try not to like tap your foot like this or something. And make sure that your hands and your arms are just kind of loose by your side. And when I say by your side, I don't mean, like a robot by your side, but just you can use your hands to talk. Just make sure your arms aren't crossed. Try not to hold your hands together like this, because even if I can't see that you're holding your hands together down here, this is not a very confident stance to stand with your hands like this. And again, even though I can't see that, it's going to come across in your voice and how you speak and how you hold yourself. So again, try to stand up and try to keep your hands by your side or just moving around while you're talking, and just try to stay as relaxed as you can. And of course, just stop me if there are any questions. Okay, so also make sure you're not reading directly from your slides. So again, practice, practice, practice. You don't want it to seem like you're reading from some sort of script or from your slides. Your speaking rate, this is again going to be something that you might just have to practice. So try not to speak too fast. It's almost better to try to speak a little bit slower than what you think is necessary, because you're probably, especially when you're doing the final presentation, you're probably going to speak faster than you feel like you're speaking anyways. So try to just slow it down a little bit. Again, staying calm is probably the best thing to focus on with how you're standing, your hands, your speaking rate. But as with an in-person presentation, an online presentation is really not all that different from an in-person one. One big difference is that it's actually harder to keep your audience's attention giving an online presentation because your audience is at home, they're comfortable, they can easily, get distracted by other things. So one of the main things is to keep your audience's attention. So one thing you can do by that is just making sure you're not speaking in a monotone voice. Make sure you're using fluctuations, the hand movements, things like that to keep your audience interested. So before I move on, are there any questions on that so far? So no, nothing. Okay. All right, so we'll move on. So this is going to be for my PowerPoint peeps. So for our presentation timeline, this is just a guideline. You do not have to follow this to the T. You can change this around however you want. But what I did to kind of help out, hopefully, is I split it up through the 10 minutes to kind of talk about what you should be hitting for each of those minute markers. So again, this is for PowerPoint presentations. So for minute 1, you want to take this time to introduce who you are, make sure you say what your major is, your department. And a little fun tip is that when you do introduce yourself, sometimes we say, for example, if I introduce myself as Kayla, which is my first name, if I introduce myself as Kayla, instead of saying, "Hi, my name is Kayla, and I'm really grateful to be here today." See how my inflection is going up when I say that last syllable of my name? "Hi, I'm Kayla." That doesn't sound super confident versus if I say, "Hi, I'm Kayla," right? My inflection goes down on the last syllable. So I already sound more confident when I say, "Hi, I'm Kayla," instead of, "Hi, I'm Kayla." It's like I'm asking myself a question. Am I Kayla? Sometimes I wonder. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so now for minutes 2 to 3. So I gave 2 minutes for this because you don't want to rush your problem statement. So this is what's going to captivate your audience. This is where you really want to suck your audience in. So you want to state what your title is and give a little bit of an introduction into your topic. So this is, again, where you're going to draw your audience in and you're going to tell them, why is this an important topic to study? Why am I even doing this study on this topic? What's the problem, or where are the gaps in the literature? So why did you even decide to do this project? And make sure you understand that your audience may not really know anything about your subject matter. So make sure you're providing the appropriate amount of background for someone who may have no clue what your topic even is. And then you'll want to finish off this section with the purpose of your study. So we know what the problem is. We know where the gaps in literature are. We know why it's important to study this. So now, what was the purpose of your study? And then that will lead perfectly into your methodology. So there are 3 minutes for this, minutes 4, 5, and 6. And the reason why there are 3 minutes for this is because, as you all know, the methods section is a really big section, and it's really hard sometimes to talk about your methods in 1 or 2 minutes. So I broke this down. Again, this is just a guideline. If you don't want to talk about some of this, or let's say you only really used a questionnaire and there were no really other instruments or equipment used, then you won't be spending much time on that. But if there were other aspects of the methods that you do need to talk about, then go ahead and add that in. So really, like I said, this is just a guideline, but you'll definitely want to talk about the types of participants that you recruited, how many, etc., all those things that you all already know and will go over with your mentors, the research design, how you collected the data, and then your statistical analysis. If you haven't completed the project yet, that's fine. You'll still talk about all these same things, except you won't be talking about it in past tense. You'll be talking about it as in it's something you're going to be doing. Okay, and then minutes 7 through 9 are going to be your findings. So what's really important about this section is to make sure that you are not just reading your results section. So make sure that you're not just reading straight up statistics, because a lot of your audience isn't going to know what you're talking about, especially if they're not really well versed in statistics. And for most people, not for all, but for most people, just hearing someone read out statistics is usually not that entertaining. So instead of just reading your straight results section, try to use verbiage that the audience will understand. So make it a little bit more applicable, make sure the audience actually understands what you found in the study. And then you'll finish with your conclusion and then any recommendations that you have for either future research or recommendations based on the findings that you found. And then your last minute, you're going to include your references. You're not going to really spend any time on your references, just make sure that they're up. And then you can express gratitude to the organizers and the audience. And then finally, you want to restate the importance of your findings. So typically when we end a presentation, we want to end it on a references slide or on a thank you slide. And we want to end it on a thank you. But really what we want to do is end it and leave the audience with the impact of your study. So you can say the thank you and show the references, but then at the end, just a really quick reminder of the impact of the study and have that be the last thing that's up. So that way that's the last thing the audience sees. And then from there, the audience can ask questions or the judges can ask questions. And that's how you would end it. So for poster, I'm going to go through it probably a little bit faster than PowerPoint because it's not that much different from the PowerPoint. It's just condensed into a 5-minute talk instead of a 10-minute talk. So for the poster presentation, like I said, this one is 5 minutes instead of 10. So for minute 1, same thing. I put the same things here. You're still going to introduce yourself, stating your major at the university and your department that you work with, and then the title of your study. Minute 2, this is where you're going to talk about same thing, introduce your topic, capture the audience by talking about why this is a problem, why this study is so important, and then what's the purpose of your study. Minutes 3 and 4, I still gave 2 minutes for this because again, the methods section I feel like is almost impossible to talk about in 60 seconds. So I gave 2 minutes to talk about the methods, but then you'll still need to include your findings and conclusion in here. Again, make it as understandable as possible for your audience, not reading straight through your results section. And then your last minute will essentially be the same thing in the last minute for the PowerPoint presentation. I know I went through that a lot faster than the PowerPoint, but does anyone have questions on that part so far?
I have a quick question. So this is kind of my first time doing this. When you're talking about having references at the end, is that actually just the list of the references that you use in your research?
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before we go on to the last bit? Okay, speak now or forever. Put your question in the chat. Okay, so some final presentation tips. Make sure that you practice in front of someone who has not seen your slides and ask them for honest feedback. So make sure you ask them, am I speaking too fast? Are my slides too confusing? Are they too wordy? Do you understand what I'm saying? Am I boring you? What can I do to make this seem more interesting or captivating? So make sure you're practicing, even if it's in front of a roommate or a friend, family member, significant other, just so you can get some honest feedback about it. Okay, and then this is just the final section I have, just a couple of slides on this for my PowerPoint presenters. This is just for putting together slides. So aside from the presentation part, because like I said, there was a workshop on creating your poster. So I just want to include a few slides on how to create your PowerPoint. So before you even start making your PowerPoint slides, make sure you create an outline. So whether it's on a piece of paper or on a Word document or something like that, you can put slide 1 and then some things you want to include in slide 1, slide 2. That way, if you realize, okay, maybe there's too much stuff in slide 1, I want to put that in slide 2, organize it all out first in an outline before you actually start to put it into PowerPoint, and it will make it so much easier and so much faster when you actually get into PowerPoint. So when you make your slides, try to keep them as simple as you can. You want a really simple theme, no patterns in the background, because when there are patterns in the background, it also makes the readability of the words go down. So make sure it's plain in the background. You want to keep contrasting colors. So for example, if you have a light background, keep the text dark. Vice versa, if you have a dark background, keep the text light. Make sure you're using the same font throughout. Make sure it's font that has high readability as well. So some good fonts, so the one I'm using here is Calibri, which has a good readability. Believe it or not, even though Times New Roman is used a lot, it has lower readability in a presentation. So try not to use Times New Roman. Arial's really good too. Arial has high readability. Try not to use all caps except for in the title. So try to keep everything low caps or no caps, I guess it would be, in your actual text, and using the bold feature. So as you can see in my slides here, and I did this to show you all too as kind of an example, but use bold to try to draw the audience into what you want them to see. So for example, if you have headings, like I have my main bullet here, that's bold, and then all my sub bullets are not bold. So it keeps it a little bit cleaner and a little bit less confusing when you're looking at the different sections. It doesn't just look like a big blob of text. You have dividers between your sections. Make sure you're utilizing any images or graphs or charts that you can, and make sure that you're not typing up what all of the graphs and charts mean or what they're showing. Try to just have the image there and then verbally explain what it is that the audience is looking at. Also, make sure you're not writing full sentences or paragraphs on your bullet points. You want to keep it on one line if possible. You don't want to include the teeny tiny minuscule details, because if you do need to elaborate on something, someone's probably going to ask a question in the Q&A section. Or if you need to elaborate on something, you can just verbally elaborate on it. This one's one of my favorite tips, actually, is exploiting empty space. So try not to think that you need to fill up every single space on the PowerPoint slide. Having empty space is actually refreshing to look at. And it actually keeps the big picture right there in front of you. So for example, let's say I have this section right here up where I have exploit empty space, and I have this section. My next section, I'm going to keep an open line here. See how I didn't? So for example, I could have just gone like that, and there's no space in between. But it actually improves, yet again, the readability if all I do is just add a space in there like that. It makes it easier to realize that these are two different sections I'm talking about. And again, I'm controlling where my audience is looking. So animations is another way to control where your audience is looking. So as you can see, I'm also using an animation because all you can see right here is where it says exploit empty space. You don't know what's coming next because I don't want you to know what's coming next, because I don't want you to read ahead and not listen to what I'm saying about this part here. So I keep pointing to my screen like you can see my hands. But so this section here where it says exploit empty space, I'm talking about that first. Now I have the animations part up. So now I'm drawing your attention to this section. This is great because when you use animations, it's not like you're throwing a whole full slide at your audience. So your audience isn't overwhelmed by all of this text on the slide. Again, you're controlling your audience. You're directing the audience where to look, and make sure that you're just using simple animations. So the one I'm using here is just the fade animation, just like that. It just fades right there in front of you. It doesn't kind of swirl in or anything like that. So try not to use super flashy animations. And this is an actual flashy animation if you're familiar with the Flash superhero. So also make sure you're limiting the total number of your slides. What you don't want to do is every 20 seconds or so, you're flipping to another slide. You want to try to stay on the same slide for about a minute, maybe even a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but try to stay on that slide for about 1 minute. So for example, if you're doing a PowerPoint presentation and it's 10 minutes long, try to keep your PowerPoint slides at around 10 slides. Also, try not to use too many abbreviations. So in all of your studies, I'm sure you have abbreviations or acronyms that you use. Try not to use them too much or at all within your presentation, because the audience will probably lose track of what all of those abbreviations mean, because they can't click back and go, oh, what did that abbreviation mean? Or what was that acronym for? So try not to use too many, because in the presentation, they're not going to be able to go back and look up what those meant again. And so that is all I have for you today. So of course, I'll open it up to questions that you all have, but if you do need further help after today, you can always email me. This is my email address. And for all of the information you need regarding the conference, I'm sure you all have it, because you wouldn't have found this workshop if you didn't have it. But this is the student research website in case you needed to have access to that again.
Dr. Baker, I also posted a direct link to the workshops page if you all were interested in seeing those recordings. And I'm also putting the page where you will find the student evaluation rubric, but it's on the judge's information page. So it might not be intuitive to go there as a student, right? But it will be posted if you'd like to access it ahead of time and see exactly how you're scored. They're still working on that. So it says, coming soon. But that is the website where you can access that, or web page. Same website.
Hello, Dr. Baker. I have a question for you.
Yes.
You said at the end of the presentation, we can restate the importance of our study. But how do you think it would be appropriate for something like a research in chemistry?
I mean, I think that I think it would be appropriate for any topic, maybe just like one brief statement after you pull up your references page, and then you say, thank you to my audience for listening, in summary, and then you can finish with maybe one sentence if possible. I don't know what your project is on, so it might be a little more intricate than being able to summarize it in one sentence. That's kind of is it a little bit more intricate than just something you can summarize really quickly?
So it is a topic which would be very specific, right? So I mean, I'm just wondering, how can I restate it in a general statement, or like it can be specific, no? So
I guess I would really have to see what the study is, or that might be something you need to work specifically with your mentor on, because again, that's not in my field. So I almost feel like I can only help so much with that. But I will say this, like I said, everything I'm presenting today is their guidelines. So if you really feel like your topic, it just wouldn't make sense to restate maybe something so intricate or very specific at the end, then you don't have to. You can end it on the thank you if you'd like to. And in fact, what you could do is, which might be a better idea for you, is to have your PowerPoint present. Are you doing PowerPoint or poster?
PowerPoint.
PowerPoint. So on your last PowerPoint slide, where you have your conclusions and your recommendations, or maybe just conclusions for your study. I'm not exactly sure how you'll have that for your study. If you have that on your last slide, then maybe what you can do is, when you have your references and then you have your thank you, maybe you can have that slide up again at the end and just verbally give your, thank you, everyone for attending. That way you don't have to restate it again, but it'll just be up on the slide. So it's the last thing they see, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it seems to be a good idea, but I was thinking, how can I do that for my topic? So thank you. And one more question. The slide before the exploit empty space, I kind of missed it at the end. Could you just?
Was this one here? Or, oh no, this one here.
Uh, yeah, right. So can you just talk about the big picture once again? I kind of missed it.
Yes, absolutely, no problem. So this is really just stating that you want to include any of the major details or major points in your study on the bullet points. You don't really want to include all those minuscule details because it starts to make your slide very cloudy and just kind of too busy and too wordy. So what you want to do is keep those big picture details in the bullet points. And then if you want to elaborate on those and include the smaller details, that's where you would just verbalize those smaller details or wait and see if they come up in the questions. And then if they come up in questions, you can elaborate that way.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have one other question. Would you say that the video recordings of the conference from last year would be a good place to reference and kind of see? I'm doing a poster.
I don't know because their last year's a little bit different than how we're doing it this year. This year we've kind of added a little more structure, I think, than maybe what was last year. I think also just because we've had more time this year to kind of put together some structure and some ideas. But I would say it definitely wouldn't hurt to look at them. I wonder if it might be just a good idea. Leah, what do you think? If maybe we found a couple from last year and posted them as examples?
I want to say there are examples from last year on the web page. Let me double check. So I'll share what I'm looking at. Oh, is it okay if I
Oh yeah. Do I need to stop my share?
think so. And this is really kind of the first time I've looked at it closely, but it looks like they're abstracts, the program, and session winners. So if that's something, when it says program, it doesn't mean the literal program. Oh, it does. Okay. Okay. So same thing with abstract. So that's not, that is not relevant.
I was able to watch one the other day just when I first came onto the conference website and she presented her poster. I can't remember exactly who it was now, but I just thought that might help for when I sit down to record it. I know Ms. Faust talked about zooming in on the poster and just kind of seeing how it looks visually was something I was just wondering about.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of hard to answer without going back and looking at them because I wouldn't want to tell you to use those as an example if they're so far off from what we're doing now. Because I know last year there were some that were like they were very different from each other because there wasn't as specific as guidelines as this year. So I guess it would just depend on exactly which one you're looking at. But if it's a 5-minute poster presentation or even just around 5-minute poster presentation, then I mean, I would definitely say to at least use it as some sort of guideline and then kind of take what you see there and combine it with what we talked about here and go from there. And then of course, if you have a video that you're watching and even if you just want to email it to me and just say, hey, is this a good video for me to base my presentation off of? I can watch it and then let you know if it's a good video to base it off of if you'd like.
Okay, thank you. I'll definitely keep that in mind.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
Andy in the chat.
Okay, well, if there are no more questions, Leah, what would you like me to do? Should we go ahead and end it here?
I was jotting down names in case for some reason we couldn't access those through our Zoom
Okay.
records. So we can email our response to that question, Kelly, you had about PowerPoint slides for each of the sections versus all in one. We will double check that. And I think we have all your names down. But I can't think of anything else. We have
Okay.
one more workshop next Thursday on visualizing research data. So stay tuned. Free to join us.
Thank you all.
Thank
for
you.
That's a really great session. Thank you, Dr. Baker. That was wonderful.
Yeah, of course. Thank you all for coming. And as always, email me if you have any other questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.